My seedlings are getting big and it's almost time to put them outside, so let's head out to the garden and I'll talk about the things I have to do to get it ready for the growing season. Okay, here we are out at the garden. Let's go over what I've done so far and then we'll talk about what's left to do before we're ready to put the plants in the ground. The first thing I had to do was go through and visually check all of these garden beds to make sure none of them were rotting out. These are all 2x12 kiln dried pine. None of them are pressure treated. And so they will eventually rot out, I know that. But this is the 4th season on most of these. Some of them are a little bit newer. And this is an example right here of one that's 4 years old. And you can see it's still in pretty good shape. This one right next to it is one of the ones that was built 2 years ago. So it's in better shape. And then this is the one I built last year. So you can really kind of tell the color difference and how they change over time. One thing I will recommend if you build these, 2x12 works great, but you'll see here I used nails, exterior nails, and in just about every other location, you can't really see it, but I used exterior screws. I would not recommend using nails. They pull out and warp over time, the boards separate. Screws work much better, cost a little bit more money. Actually right there you can see where it's starting to pull apart, so I'll have to come back through these this year and sink some screws into that to keep them together. Other than that, I think the beds are all in pretty good shape. The next thing that I did, you'll see in this garden bed, all of that sawdust in there is all from the chicken coop. So I went through and I looked at my garden plan, decided which beds were probably going to have greens like kale and spinach in them, and I mixed in some chicken manure. Other beds don't have any. Some of that's based off what got it last year and what didn't. You don't want to put too much chicken manure in. It's so high in nitrogen that in some cases it could possibly hurt the plant, and in other cases it will cause the plant to grow really big and green and beautiful and really not produce much, like tomatoes. They don't need a ton of nitrogen. So now I have a couple of projects ahead of me today to finish getting the garden ready. First off, you can see I have some weeds I've got to go through and pull out. Somebody asked in a previous video whether I put any kind of weed barrier down underneath these boxes before I filled them with compost, and I didn't. I personally don't think it's necessary. These are 12-inch boxes, so they hold quite a bit of compost, which kills most of anything underneath it. Plus, hopefully your plants are going to do well enough that their roots will need to get deeper than the compost that's in it, so you're really going to want to let them grow as far as they need to. Also, you'll see in between the garden beds, my grass is getting pretty tall. I'll post some pictures. In a previous garden we had the land before we moved here, I went through and I dug up everything that was in between the garden beds, and then I filled it with bark mulch. Sorry, not bark mulch, wood chips. And that worked really well. It was so much easier to maintain throughout the year. It looked better. I think it actually helped the boxes last longer because it was lower and the grass didn't grow up and cause moisture to be around the edge of the boxes. But that garden was also a lot smaller and it was a lot easier of a project, so I just haven't had the time to do it here yet. So here I just mow in between them for now and try to keep the grass down as much as I can. Next up, I have to go through and fill up some of these garden beds. You'll see that one right there. I haven't put anything in that one since I think 4 years ago. So that one started to pack down, and you know, it loses a little bit every year as the plants grow and as I pull out the root balls, so it gets lower and lower. Here's an example of one when it is filled up with fresh compost. This one actually has spinach seeds planted in it. I just planted them in it the other day. I don't think there's much coming up yet, but it's getting close. They should spring up in the next day or two. I should take a second and talk about compost. I've had some bad experiences getting some bad compost in the past. I've bought compost before from some local farms, which sounds like it's a really great idea, but depending on where they get their material, where they then break it down into compost, it can be of really poor quality. Some places they get it from the local city. The city will come by as they're doing cleanups and will drop off leaves and things they've collected off the sides of the roads, and it ends up being loaded with garbage. Other places, if they're getting it from maybe a landscape supply or something like that, it will have a lot of bark mulch or rocks in with it, and it's just really not worth the money. So I finally found a place local to me where the quality is really good. I recommend, if you've never bought from a place before and you're not sure, ask to see it first before you buy it. Take a look, make sure it's good and dark, it's moist, it's not loaded with wood chips or anything else large. Obviously make sure there's no garbage, those kinds of things, and try to make sure that there are no weeds growing in it. You're going to get some weeds no matter what, but if you're already seeing them at the point that you're buying it, you're really doomed to be dealing with somebody else's weed problem right from the beginning. You can see this stuff is really good, dark, crumbly, good material. This has worked really well for me. I've used it now this is the 3rd season I bought from this company, so I really like it. Alright, we're all set. This is the finished product. I filled up the garden beds that were the lowest. Took about a yard of compost. In future years I hope to be able to just produce enough compost here to top off whatever boxes are getting low, but right now I just don't have enough, so bought a yard. And then a few beds I just had to pull out the weeds and loosen up the soil. It's one of the things I really love about doing the raised beds versus just a traditional garden where you just till up an area of your land, is that all of this was done with hand tools. I didn't have to use any power tools to break up the soil. There's no hard compacted soil where you've walked or anything like that. So it was very quick and easy. This whole thing took me about 2.5 hours, and that includes the time to go pick up the compost and drive back here with it. So, all right, on to the next video. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you soon.